When my sister Melanie knocked on my door with a duffel bag the size of her ego, I should have known better. "Just a few days," she said, mascara perfectly intact despite the sob story. "Until I get back on my feet." Right. Melanie hadn't stood on her own 2 feet since she was 16 and realized people would do anything if she just tilted her head and pretended to be a little helpless, like a chihuahua in a hurricane. But I was her older sister, the responsible one, the one who flosses and files taxes on time and makes banana bread for the neighbors, even when I secretly hate bananas. So of course I opened the door. Of course. I let her in. And of course I offered her the guest room because I'm not an animal. My husband Greg, saint that he is, didn't say a word that first night. He just poured 2 glasses of wine and raised an eyebrow as we listened to Melanie recount her latest dramatic downfall. Fired from her marketing job for being too creative, dumped by her boyfriend because he was intimidated by her ambition, and evicted because her landlord was jealous of her energy. Greg whispered, "Should we start a GoFundMe for her self-awareness?" I laughed. God help me. I laughed. The first few days were manageable. Melanie lounged in our living room like she was on the cover of Vogue, Home Invasion Edition. She drank our oat milk, used my retinol cream like it was moisturizer, and left half-finished glasses of rosé all over the house like she was starting an art installation titled Decay of Sobriety. She also had this way of appearing helpful without actually being helpful. She'd fold half a load of laundry, then disappear for 3 hours meditating in the backyard. She offered to cook one night, ordered Thai, and transferred it to our dishes. "Presentation is everything," she said, while Greg and I stared at our delivery pad Thai, like it might reveal ancient truths if we looked long enough. Still, I told myself it was temporary. Just a rough patch. She was family, after all. My sister. And then came the morning Greg pulled me aside in the kitchen. We were half into our Sunday routines. Him making espresso, me alphabetizing the spice rack because anxiety is a hell of a drug when he said it. "Babe, I think Melanie might be flirting with me." I blinked. "Like, flirting? He nodded. "Yeah, like, lingering touches, calling me G-man, asking if I'm really satisfied." I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh you let out when you hear a creak in the attic and really hope it's the wind. "She's just being Melanie," I said, brushing it off with a smile that felt stapled to my face. "She's like that with everyone. You know how she is." Greg didn't argue. He just sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim like he was waiting for me to join him in reality. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because the truth was, Melanie and I had history. Not just sibling stuff, shared childhood, matching Halloween costumes, arguments over who got the last Pop-Tart. No, we had wounds. Old ones. And deep down, I always feared that acknowledging her toxicity meant acknowledging how long I'd let it rot in the fridge of my life. So I ignored it. I let it slide when she asked Greg to help her fix the Wi-Fi in her towel. I rolled my eyes when she complimented his muscles after yoga. I rationalized, minimized, and weaponized my own denial like a damn pro. And Greg? He withdrew. Not in a dramatic way, just little things. Fewer smiles, less eye contact, sex that felt like an obligation rather than a connection. But still, I said, nothing. I wanted to be the bigger person. And by bigger, I guess I mean dumber. Then, one evening, it happened. Greg came into our bedroom with that face, the one he wore when the car broke down last winter, or when I found a dead bird on the porch and screamed like I was in a Hitchcock film. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice low. I sat up, heart doing jumping jacks. She came onto me. For real this time. Explicit. Told me she fantasized about us. Said she didn't care about you. She tried to kiss me. Silence. Not just in the room, but inside me. My entire being went quiet, like my brain didn't trust my mouth not to betray me. She was drunk, he added quickly. I pushed her off, told her no. And I was going to tell you sooner, but I knew you wouldn't believe me. And here's the part I'm least proud of. I didn't, or rather, I refused to. I told myself maybe he misunderstood. Maybe she was being playful. Maybe he was the one reading too much into it. My own husband. because believing him meant facing the reality that Melanie wasn't just a mess, she was a bomb. And I'd invited her to detonate in my home. "I think you should sleep on the couch," I said. His eyes narrowed. "Me?" "I just need space," I muttered. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just picked up his pillow and left like he already knew this house wasn't his anymore. That night, I lay awake, surrounded by silence that felt louder than anything. I wanted to believe I was right, but something in me had shifted. A seed, of doubt, small but persistent, had rooted itself in my chest. The next week was awkward, to say the least. Greg stayed distant. Melanie acted like nothing had happened. If anything, she was nicer to me, baking muffins, offering foot rubs, suggesting sister spa days. Guilt is a hell of a costume. Then one Thursday morning, I found her puking in the bathroom. "Hungover?" I asked. She shook her head. And just like that, I knew. Pregnancy. Of course, I didn't say it out loud. I just watched her brush her teeth and wipe tears from her cheeks as she blamed it on bad shrimp. That afternoon, I snooped. Her purse, her phone, even her trash. I found the test. I found the receipt. Positive. I waited for her to tell me. I waited a day, then two. But she said nothing. Finally, she came to me with a carefully rehearsed sob and a hand on her belly. "I have news." I played dumb. "Oh?" "I'm pregnant." I blinked. "With whose baby?" Her lip trembled. "It was just a mistake. Someone from before, I think." "You think?" She nodded. "I'm just so scared, alone, no job, no partner." And that's when the final domino fell. Because as much as I wanted to scream, to throw her out, to smash every wine glass, in the house we were blood, and I was tired. So tired of playing the fool. So I hugged her. I told her everything would be okay. And inside, I started planning. Because if Melanie wanted my life so badly, she was going to get it. Just not the way she imagined. When your sister announces a surprise pregnancy while living in your house, raiding your fridge and potentially seducing your husband, there are a few appropriate responses. One of them is emotional collapse. Another is homicide. I chose neither. I chose strategy. Of course, I didn't look like I was strategizing. I smiled. I cooed. I even offered to take Melanie to her first OB appointment. "Really?" she asked, dabbing fake tears with a tissue from a box she had bought. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course," I said, laying the sweetness on like frosting on a poisoned cake. "We're family." She sniffled, hugged me like a toddler clinging to a security blanket, and whispered, "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd probably move in with your next victim," I thought. It was amazing how quickly she adapted to her new role as mother-to-be. She started walking around with one hand on her stomach, like she was auditioning for a diaper commercial. Greg noticed, of course, but he said nothing. We weren't exactly talking much these days. He'd moved into the guest room, ironic, considering that was originally Melanie's domain, and our conversations had devolved into texts like, "Me. Do you want anything from the store?" Greg. "We need more paper towels. Marital bliss, truly." But while the love of my life was hiding behind bounty rolls, my sister was nesting in my nest. She commandeered the living room TV for baby documentaries. She started ordering prenatal vitamins and maternity dresses with my Amazon Prime. She even asked if I'd consider converting the office into a nursery. "Just while I figure things out," she said, fluttering her lashes. "Of course," I said. "Anything for the baby." Inside, I was boiling, but I wasn't stupid. If I snapped too soon, she'd play the victim. She always did. The key was subtlety. I needed proof. I needed precision. And, above all, I needed patience. So I played the role of the supportive sister with Oscar-worthy conviction. I made her smoothies. I downloaded a pregnancy tracker app and sent her cheerful weekly updates. "Your baby is the size of a kiwi." She loved it. But even queens get sloppy when they think they've won. And Melanie? She got real sloppy. It started with a phone call. She was in the bathroom, where she always took her private calls, and I happened to be walking by. The door wasn't fully shut. Neither was her mouth. I told him it wasn't his, she whispered. Pause. No. He still doesn't suspect anything. He thinks I'm just scared. God, he's so easy. Another pause. A laugh. Yeah, and she's completely clueless. It's kind of sad. I froze. No name. No direct reference. But it was enough. Enough to know that she wasn't just lying. She was planning. And possibly not alone. That night, I took her phone while she was asleep. I know. Violating privacy, blah blah. But let's be honest, the moral high ground wasn't exactly my zip code anymore. Unfortunately, she had a passcode, 4 digits. But Melanie was predictable. She'd used her birthday as a password since the dawn of AIM chat rooms. So I typed 0524, unlocked. I felt like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure, if the treasure was evidence that your sister might be pregnant with your husband's child. I opened her messages and saw it, a contact named L. Here's the thing. Melanie doesn't have any friends whose names start with L. She barely has friends, period. She collects men and burns bridges. That's her social circle. The conversation was mostly her, Melanie. She's still buying it. Melanie. I think he's starting to break. Just a little more time. Melanie. Soon we'll have everything. I'll make sure. My stomach flipped. He? Who? Was he? Greg? God. Was it Greg? I wanted to confront him. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more. Something undeniable. Something that would burn this whole illusion to the ground. So I started building my case. First, DNA. I suggested a fun little gender reveal lunch at a new cafe downtown. Melanie was thrilled. She loved any excuse to wear heels and post selfies. I swabbed her straw when she went to the bathroom, tucked it into a Ziploc, and sent it to a discreet lab I found online that specialized in prenatal paternity testing. I sent Greg's toothbrush too. I waited 2 weeks. While I waited, I played house. I smiled through Melanie's hormonal swings, her passive-aggressive digs, and her sudden insistence that she might want to settle down in a place like this. She even floated the idea of me being the baby's godmother. I nearly choked on my coffee. Greg, meanwhile, was drifting. He barely spoke to either of us. I wasn't sure if it was guilt, stress, or just the natural side effect of living in a toxic triangle of madness. I started noticing other things too. Melanie's belly? Still flat as a pancake. No cravings, no mood swings, aside from her usual dramatics. No doctor's appointments she actually let me attend. Every time I offered to go, she suddenly felt too overwhelmed, or just needed space. It hit me one night, while watching her take a selfie in our bathroom mirror, strategically pushing her stomach out. What if she wasn't pregnant at all? What if the test I found was staged? What if she was faking the entire thing? That's when I went full detective. I tracked the receipt from the pregnancy test. Cash. But it was dated before she even moved in. I checked the trash. Nothing new. So I took her to lunch again, and this time I excused myself to the bathroom, but detoured to her purse. Inside was a second test, box intact, unused, dated last week. So either she was collecting tests like Beanie Babies, or the first one had been a setup. I was leaning hard toward the latter. Then the DNA results arrived. Sat at the kitchen counter, laptop open, heart racing like a teenager reading her crush's texts. The verdict? Greg was not the father. Cue Maury Povich applause track. I felt a strange mix of vindication and heartbreak. I didn't want it to be Greg's. God, no. But a small, dark part of me had prepared for that outcome, had started rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd leave, what kind of wine I'd drink in the motel parking lot while ugly crying. Instead, I just felt hollow, because the baby wasn't Greg's, but someone else was clearly in on this mess, someone named L, and I needed to find him. That night, I brought Greg into the war room, aka our garage, where Melanie never dared venture because spiders exist. I showed him the texts, the DNA results, the fake receipts, the whole spiderweb of lies. He looked at me, stunned. You think she's faking the pregnancy? I know she is. Then why is she doing all this? I took a breath. She wants this house. She wants you. She wants a family without doing any of the work. She's a parasite with contour. Greg shook his head, pacing. Jesus. Language, I said, half smiling. He laughed, his first real laugh in weeks. I'm in, he said. In what? Whatever your plan is. I'm in. I hadn't even told him yet, but I smiled because now it was war. And Melanie had no idea she was fighting two people with a shared mortgage and a thirst for vengeance. We started subtle. Greg became nicer, sweeter. He offered to make her tea, rubbed her shoulders, listened to her ramble about nursery colors. Melanie melted like a discount candle. She thought he was caving. I, on the other hand, became a little less supportive, slightly cold, just enough to make her feel like she was winning. The trap was set, but we needed bait. So I went into the office/future nursery and left something on the desk. A printed photo of Greg's supposed new job offer. One that would relocate him across the country. One that mentioned me as the lead candidate for a high-paying consulting gig in New York. Melanie found it, of course. Are you guys moving? She asked, feigning casual interest. We're thinking about it, I said, sipping wine. But we'd never leave you in the lurch, she blinked, calculating. You'd take the baby too? The baby? Oh, honey. If it's not Greg's, why would we? Boom. That was the first crack in her facade. She laughed it off, but her fingers twitched. Later that night, I saw her texting someone furiously. Elle, no doubt. Greg and I watched from the window like gleeful psychopaths. I give it 48 hours before she snaps, he said. T4, I replied. I was wrong. It was 12. At dawn, she stormed into our room, waving her phone like a torch. You read my texts? You went through my stuff. Greg sat up. What texts? Don't play dumb. Mel, I said calmly. Why don't you sit down? I'm not sitting down. I'm pregnant, and you're not pregnant. Silence. Greg reached into the drawer and pulled out the DNA results. She went pale. You faked it, I said, and you lied, and you plan to use this house, us, to trap some loser named Elle into playing daddy. I didn't. You did. And now you're going to leave, quietly. Or I'll forward everything to your former boss, your landlord, and every mutual friend you've ever manipulated. She blinked. You wouldn't, I smiled. Try me. Melanie didn't leave immediately. Queens never abdicate without a grand finale. First, she cried, then screamed, then launched into a Tony-worthy monologue about sisterhood, emotional persecution, and how pregnancy messes with the brain. She even dropped to her knees in a dramatic collapse, as if the walls were literally closing in, which, in a way, they were. Greg and I sat at the kitchen counter, sipping coffee. Like we were watching the morning news. I wore my fluffy robe. He wore his smug smile. Sunlight streamed in from the window, like poetic justice in high definition. You have to believe me, Melanie wailed, getting up from the floor. I didn't lie. I was pregnant. I just lost it. A miscarriage. I didn't want to tell you because you're both so cold and judgmental. Mel, I said calmly, the lab called last night. They said there was no fetal DNA in the sample you gave them. Zero. Nada. She froze. Her face drained of color like a bad Instagram filter. Greg crossed his arms. You want to try another lie? Or are we ready to pack? Melanie stared at him. For a split second I saw it. Not sadness, not regret, but cold, calculated rage. She realized the game was over. The mask slipped, and all that was left was a very average woman with a PhD in manipulation and a minor in gaslighting. You two deserve each other, she spat. So perfect, so self-righteous. You have no idea who I really am. I smiled. Oh, honey, we do now. We even took notes. Greg leaned casually against the counter. Want me to tell Elle everything? Or should I forward him the screenshots? Her eyes twitched. I picked up my phone from the table and turned the screen to face her. The messages between her and Elle, some married man she'd been seeing behind his wife's back, Scrolled by in all their glory. Also, I added, thinking of posting these to that Facebook group, Ladies Beware. Just for fun. She didn't say a word. She left 2 hours later, dragging her pink suitcase like a defeated villain exiting the final act of a bad soap opera. She looked back once, probably hoping for a last-minute redemption arc. None came. Greg and I stood by the window watching her shuffle down the sidewalk. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of silence you only notice when chaos has finally left the building. She'll be back, Greg said quietly. Maybe, I said. But next time, she'll meet my new friend. I pointed at the shiny new security camera above the porch. He chuckled. I turned to him. For the first time in months, I really looked at him. Not the man I'd been resenting, not the man I thought might have betrayed me, but the man who had stood next to me, quietly, patiently, waiting for me to believe him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Greg looked down. Because I was ashamed. She was persuasive, and I was angry at myself, at us. I thought I deserved the chaos. Chaos isn't love, Greg. He looked up. No, it's a fire pretending to be warmth. I didn't say anything. Then finally, you didn't sleep with her. No, he said, without hesitation. I know. He nodded slowly. Then, without ceremony, he pulled me into a hug. Not a romantic, passionate, sweeping movie embrace, but the kind of embrace that says, I still choose you, even after the wreckage. The next few days, we cleaned the house like we were prepping for an exorcism. Every trace of Melanie was removed like toxic mold. The pink mug with mommy fuel, gone. The prenatal vitamins she left on the nightstand, trash. The pregnancy pillow she bought to sell the fantasy, burned. Well, not literally, but I thought about it. I repainted the office, bought a new bookshelf, filled it with my books, rearranged the furniture, reclaimed the space. Greg suggested couples therapy. I agreed, not because I thought our marriage was over, but because I wanted to make sure it never looked like that again. Messy, cracked, and vulnerable to parasites in lipstick. But of course, Melanie wasn't done. Parasites don't die after one extermination. I received an email a week later. Subject, what you did was a crime from melanieddramaqueen@gmail.com. You invaded my privacy. You betrayed your own blood. I was just trying to start over and you threw me out like garbage. Congrats. I hope you're happy with your fake husband and fake life. P.S. Maybe I told Elle a few things. Maybe he didn't like what he heard. Careful who you trust. Melly didn't respond. But I did something better. I got a lawyer, showed her the texts, the fake pregnancy, the threat, the email, the whole Shakespearean drama. Just to be safe, we installed security cameras around the house, motion sensors, smart locks, the works. Greg wasn't thrilled at first, said it made the house feel like a bunker. I told him bunkers are designed to keep things out. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. A month passed. Then came the 3:26 a.m. notification. Motion detected, front door camera, there she was, hoodie, flashlight, backpack, trying to pick the lock like a rookie burglar in a Lifetime movie. I called the cops. She claimed she was just there to retrieve a necklace she left behind. The footage showed her jamming a credit card into the doorframe like a bad magician. They took her in. She was out within hours, of course. Manipulators always land on their feet. But we got the restraining order. And that was enough. For now. 6 months later, the house is clean, quiet, peaceful. Greg and I still have our moments, like any couple. He leaves socks everywhere. I sometimes use his razor because I'm lazy and entitled, but we laugh again. We talk without walking on eggshells. He doesn't flinch when my phone rings. I don't check his location when he's 5 minutes late. The cameras stay up, but mostly now for package theft. The ghost of Melanie has been exorcised. Almost. I saw her last week, at a coffee shop, 2 towns over. She was talking to a man I didn't recognize. flashing her best innocent girl smile, resting a hand on her stomach in a very deliberate way. Old habits die hard. I didn't approach. I just watched. And I saw it. Her looking around nervously, checking her phone like she was timing. Something she left before finishing her drink, same suitcase. Same predator's strut. Only now I know better. Sometimes people ask me, how could you not see it sooner? And the truth is, you don't want to see a snake when it's wearing your sister's face. You excuse the weird comments, the manipulations, the flirting. You believe the lies because the alternative is too painful, that someone you loved never loved you back. But I see her now, clearly, and I don't hate her anymore. Not because she deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. And Melanie, she deserves exactly what she's gotten. Nothing. A week after my last encounter with Melanie, the feeling of peace I'd begun to nurture felt like a lie. I told myself it was only a matter of time before I'd hear from her again. One more desperate plea to come back. One more attempt at a sob story about a life ruined by betrayal. And then it came. I woke up one Sunday morning to an email with no subject line. The message was simple, almost nonchalant, as if we were back to a normal, sisterly routine, sharing life updates over coffee. From melanieddramaqueen@gmail.com. Subject, blank. Hey, I need your help with something. Can we talk? I promise it's important. I know you're mad at me, but I need you to understand. I'm not trying to hurt you anymore. I just want closure. The email sounded too familiar. The desperate undertones. The carefully crafted victimhood. My gut churned. It was all wrong. I felt it, like a whisper on the wind, a sign I had ignored too many times before. But I was done with ignoring. Melanie's manipulation, her clever gaslighting, the way she twisted everything in her favor. I wasn't that woman anymore. I looked at Greg as I read the email out loud, and when I finished, he didn't say a word. He just nodded and poured himself another cup of coffee, a slight smile playing at his lips. Does she really think we'd fall for this again? I asked, my voice low, dripping with sarcasm. Greg took a sip of his coffee, the steam curling around his face, his eyes calm. She's about to learn that we're not as stupid as she thinks. I hit reply. Subject, you're too late. It's too late, Melanie. Whatever your game is this time, I'm done. I can't help you. I won't help you. Not now. Not ever. I know exactly what you're doing, and I see you. I pressed send. So, was a victory in itself. Finally, I'd said the words out loud. I wasn't the person who had tolerated her for so long. I wasn't the person who tried to save her every time she ruined herself. And then I got up and went about my morning. The weight in my chest, lighter now than it had been in months, slowly began to fade. There was nothing left to fear, nothing left to prove. But I should have known better. 2 days later, Greg received a call from a lawyer. I was in the middle of making lunch, the sound of the stove sizzling in the background when I heard Greg's tone change. It wasn't his usual calm, deep voice. It was colder, more clinical, as he answered the phone. I turned off the stove and moved closer, sensing that this wasn't the usual phone call. Who is this? He asked sharply, eyes narrowing. His jaw tightened. I didn't need to hear the rest. I could see it in his face. He wasn't talking to some random telemarketer. I knew it was Melanie. Greg listened for a few more moments, the only sound in the room the steady tick of the clock on the wall, each second hanging heavily between us. Fine. Send it over, he said, then hung up. He didn't say anything as he turned back to me, his face unreadable. Greg, I said softly. What happened? He met my eyes and exhaled. She's taking us to court. I froze. What? Why? He looked down at the floor, his mind clearly elsewhere, but then looked back up at me. She's claiming harassment, said we bullied her out of the house. She even sent screenshots of our messages to some lawyer she found. Claims I was emotionally abusive. My stomach turned. The accusation hit like a slap. It didn't make sense. But then again, neither did anything Melanie did anymore. She's insane, I muttered. She'll never win this. Greg shrugged. She's got a lawyer. She's got nothing else left to lose. And this is her last play. I bit my lip. We need to fight back. She's not getting away with this. Greg nodded. I'm already talking to a lawyer. We'll be fine. It wasn't fine. Over the next few weeks, Melanie's vendetta against us escalated. First, she started showing up at our neighborhood events, pretending to be the victim. She'd corner our friends, acting as though we had betrayed her, spreading her version of the story like some twisted gospel. She was good at it, too. Really good. She played the part of the damsel in distress with a quiet, rehearsed precision. By the time the town got wind of what was happening, people were starting to side with her. The same people who had once warned me about her manipulation were now offering support, telling me how sad they felt for Melanie. They didn't know the half of it. They didn't see her for what she really was. A liar, a manipulator, a parasite feeding off my life for far too long. And of course, Greg and I were being dragged through the mud along with her. The court date loomed ahead like an oncoming storm, and I felt myself slipping back into old patterns, nervous, anxious, ready to cave. But that wasn't going to happen. Not this time. One evening, I was sitting in our living room, flipping through some paperwork for the case when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was from Melanie. Subject, you're going to regret this. You can't hide from me forever. I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are. You'll lose everything. You've already lost the only thing that matters, your family. And when I'm done, you'll be the one begging for forgiveness. It was almost laughable. She had no idea what she was up against. I showed Greg the email and his face darkened. She thinks she can scare us. She doesn't know what we're capable of. No, I said. But I do. The next day, I met with our lawyer. I was done playing defense. It was time for the offensive. We had been gathering evidence for months. Pictures, texts, timestamps, everything that proved Melanie's true nature. It wasn't just about her behavior in our home. It was about everything she had done to destroy our lives. Every manipulative text she'd sent, every lie she'd told, every family member she'd twisted against us. She'd left a trail wide, enough for the world to see. And now it was time to shine the light on her. I could see the lawyer's face light up as I presented everything. This is good. This is really good, he said. We're going to bury her. I smiled, feeling a surge of power rush through me. I didn't need to hide anymore. I didn't need to apologize or beg for mercy. I was done being the victim. And this time, the truth would be my weapon. A week later, Greg and I sat in the courtroom, watching Melanie squirm in the witness stand as our lawyer tore her apart. She was trying to maintain her composure, but it was clear she had underestimated me. I felt a sense of vindication as I watched her unravel. She tried to make it look like she was the innocent one, the poor woman who had been forced to leave her sister's house because of our cruelty. But every lie she told, every twist in her version of the story, was met with evidence. Evidence I had meticulously gathered. Greg squeezed my hand under the table, his face a mask of calm. We were in control now. When the verdict came, I didn't even need to hear it. I already knew Melanie lost, and just like that, she was gone, out of our lives for good. Weeks passed. The silence in our home was no longer filled with dread. It was filled with peace, with quiet laughter, with moments that felt real again. Greg and I found our rhythm, the rhythm we had lost in all the chaos. And Melanie, I didn't care. She would always be out there, twisting stories, playing her games. But she was no longer my problem. She had made her last move, and I had finally won. The aftermath of Melanie's defeat didn't come with fanfare or triumph. No confetti dropped from the ceiling, no applause from an imaginary audience. It was a quiet victory, the kind that sneaks up on you like a shadow at dusk, there but almost imperceptible. But the peace was deafening. Greg and I settled into a new normal, one that didn't revolve around Melanie's lies, her manipulations, or her relentless search for pity. It was like we had hit the reset button, erasing the chaos she'd dragged into our lives. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without that suffocating weight of uncertainty pressing on my chest. But as much as I tried to tell myself I was done with her, Melanie was never truly gone. Like a ghost, she haunted my thoughts, lurking just beyond the veil of the life I had rebuilt. I should have known better. After all, she wasn't one to just fade into the background. A month after the court case had concluded, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Greg came home from work. I didn't notice him at first. My back was to the door as I sliced vegetables, humming a song I'd heard on the radio earlier. It was a small, mundane moment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it was mine. Our life was finally ordinary again. Then I heard it. The faintest sound of a car engine pulling into our driveway. I froze. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. My gut twisted with the recognition. The same feeling of dread that had been lurking for weeks bubbled up to the surface, and my fingers went cold against the knife handle. Greg stepped into the kitchen, his expression unreadable. He looked at me for a moment before glancing out the window. "Is that her?" I asked, my voice tight, betraying the calm I was desperately trying to maintain. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window and peered through the blinds. His face hardened, and when he finally turned back to me, there was a glint of something sharp behind his eyes. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It's her." I felt my heart start to race. "Why is she here?" "She's not here for me," he replied, his tone colder than it had been in weeks. "She's here for you." The doorbell rang, and my stomach dropped. I set the knife down slowly, as if doing anything too quickly might cause the whole world to shatter. "I'll get it," I said, my voice a mix of defiance and something darker. I wasn't going to let her have the satisfaction of seeing me break. "Not again." Greg nodded, a warning in his eyes. I walked to the door with deliberate slowness, taking a moment to collect myself. I needed to be calm. I needed to be strong. Melanie was nothing. A distant memory. A chapter I had closed long ago. But when I opened the door, there she was, standing in the doorway, her expression the perfect mask of innocence. Her hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and she wore a simple black dress, the kind that looked like she'd been trying too hard to appear composed. She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, sis," she said sweetly, as if nothing had happened, as if her actions hadn't torn our world apart just weeks ago. "Can I come in?" I stood there for a moment, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face and never look back. But the other part of me, this strange, sick curiosity, wanted to hear what she had to say. So I stepped aside and let her in. She walked past me without a second glance, making her way into the living room as if she owned the place. It wasn't the first time she'd walked into my home with that air of entitlement, but this time it felt different. This time, I was prepared. "Greg isn't here, is he?" Melanie asked, her voice almost too sweet, too sugary. "No, he's in the kitchen," I replied flatly, "but I don't think he'll be too happy to see you." "Why? Is he still upset with me?" she asked, tilting her head as if she genuinely didn't understand. "We need to talk, sis. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to make amends." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bitter on my lips. "Amends? You think you can just waltz back in here after everything you've done and expect me to believe you?" Melanie's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered, masking her unease with an exaggerated sigh. "I know you're angry, but I've changed. I'm not the same person I was. You can't just keep holding on to all that bitterness. It's not good for you, you know." "Bitterness?" I repeated, almost choking on the word. "You're the one who's been bitter. You've ruined everything in your path for your own amusement, and now you want me to forgive you? Just like that?" "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said quickly, her eyes darting to the door, like she was already regretting coming here. I cut her off. "No, you're not asking for forgiveness. You're trying to manipulate me. Again." She stood there for a moment, silent, before her eyes narrowed. "You've always been so difficult, so stubborn. You never see the bigger picture." I clenched my fists, ready to retort, but before I could speak, Greg appeared behind me. His presence was like a steel wall, solid and unwavering. He didn't say anything at first, but his silence spoke volumes. Melanie turned to face him, And for the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. It was brief, but it was there. She had underestimated him, just like she had underestimated me. "I'm not here to fight," she said, though I knew it was a lie. I thought we could put the past behind us and move forward." "You've already done too much damage," Greg replied, his voice low, but with a strength that made it clear this was the end of the line for her. "You don't get to waltz back into our lives like nothing happened." I watched as Melanie's mask cracked. Her lips twitched in frustration, and I saw something darker, something much more dangerous flash in her eyes. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed. "You think you've got the upper hand? But you haven't. You'll see, you'll regret this." I leaned in closer to her, my voice cold and steady. "No, Melanie, you will regret this. And I can promise you, you've made the biggest mistake of your life coming here." The silence that followed was deafening. Melanie's eyes widened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she seemed small. She didn't have the power anymore. It wasn't in her hands. Not anymore. She turned and left without another word. The door slammed behind her, and the quiet settled in once more. Weeks passed, months even. And though I never saw her again, I knew that this was how it had to end. Melanie had always been a parasite, feeding off of the lives of those who loved her. But not anymore. I had learned the most important lesson. I didn't need her. I never had. And as I sat in the quiet of my living room, Greg at my side, the world outside carried on, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had once taken hold of our lives. But I knew one thing for sure. Melanie had underestimated me, and I would never be her victim again.